Hi, my name is Jackie Baxter, and I am really excited to have been invited to share my story and my recovery tips. I became unwell in March 2020, and at the time, I would have considered myself a completely healthy, very fit person. I was 30 at the time and just didn't really consider myself to be in any way at risk of anything like this happening to me, and how wrong I was. So my illness, I think, fit into the sort of mild to moderate category. Didn't feel particularly mild a lot of the time, but I think, it could have been very much worse than it was. And I am now fully recovered. It took me 39 months, so a bit over 3 years, to get to the point where I said, yes, I am recovered. And at that point, looking back now, that was 6 months ago. And I think, yes, I was fully recovered at that point. Long COVID was not a thing for me anymore. But at the same time, it was also the start of a different journey, which has been quite interesting in many, many ways. So the three things that have helped me the most, and I think possibly before I dive into that, it's probably worth me just saying that, yeah, these three things were the things that helped me the most, but I also tried many, many, many other things that, some of which helped a little bit, some of which actually didn't seem to help at all. But I was trying all sorts of different things, as I think a lot of people do. So I think one of the things that actually was helpful was kind of understanding what was kind of happening. So the first thing that I noticed significant improvement with was learning to breathe better, which sounds a bit woo-woo. And that was what I thought when somebody said to me, I can help your illness by teaching you to breathe better. And I was like, whatever. But also I was kind of so desperate at the time that I thought, well, I might give it a go. And what it turned out was that, yes, actually, he was right, that I was breathing dysfunctionally. I was probably a dysfunctional breather before I got ill, but then the illness itself massively exacerbated this to the point where I was effectively hyperventilating all the time. So I was able to fix my breathing pattern and become a functional breather, which was hugely helpful, but then also use the breath to influence the autonomic nervous system. And this goes back to what I was saying a moment ago about understanding what was going on. So initially I was flailing. I just had basically overnight become sick with all of these things that were all happening all at once. And how was it possible that somebody who was previously completely healthy, had come down with all these different things that were wrong with her all at once? It seemed a bit unbelievable in some ways. How can I suddenly just be so unwell in so many different ways? And understanding about the autonomic nervous system, and this was an understanding that I started to get through the breath, it was suddenly okay, so it's not that 100 different things are wrong with me. Actually, it's one thing that's wrong with me that is causing all of these other massively wide-ranging things. So that was kind of a double whammy, actually, there, the breathing, and the start of the understanding. And that was absolutely huge because I now had a tool. So I was breathing better anyway. And then when things did start getting bad, because they did all the time, then I was able to use some of these breathing exercises to influence my body. So I didn't get it right all the time, but sometimes I would be able to make a crash less bad, or even kind of intercept it before it really got going sometimes. It took quite a lot of practice. But the power of the breath was something that was just so incredibly powerful, to the point where I trained as a breathing instructor, and I am now working as a breathing instructor with people suffering with chronic illness. So it had a huge, huge impact on me. The second thing that was a huge help to me was kind of connected to the breath. I mean, the breath kind of led on to it. And this was yoga nidra and all of those like guided meditation things that just allowed me to shut off my brain. And this was something, again, that I've kind of learned to understand through the illness, which was that, I mean, pacing is hard. Like, pacing sucks, and I was terrible at it. And I would constantly be overdoing it, crashing, and then constantly overdoing it again in this kind of boom and bust cycle. But that there were more than one type of pacing. So pacing physical activity, I mean, I was still terrible at it, but it was easier for me to understand, physical stuff. If I walked to the post box, if I tried to do something else, even on some days, things like climbing the stairs, it was a whole different world where brushing my teeth was exhausting, but it was something physical, and that made some sense to me on some level. But the cognitive pacing, where reading, which was something that I'd done a massive amount of before, was suddenly absolutely exhausting. Things like reading on screens, looking at an email, having a conversation, these things were the things that I really struggled with. And emotional stuff as well. So if I had an argument with my partner, I mean, I had several occasions before I really understood what was going on, where it would just have knocked me out, and I'd be like, but I don't know what I did this time. I didn't overdo it physically, I didn't overdo it cognitively. What did I do? And I also know that I have a massive tendency to overthink. I have a very, very busy brain that just, it's like a hamster wheel. And things like yoga nidra and these guided meditations, and the breath to some extent as well, because that's connected, really allowed me to cognitively rest in a way that I just couldn't otherwise. Some people are able to just sit down and basically, like, the switch is turned off, and my brain just doesn't do that. It just round and round and round and round. So the yoga nidras, which allowed me to really truly cognitively rest, was hugely helpful. And then the third thing for me was cold water swimming, or even just cold water, like getting in cold water, because initially I just got in and kind of floated for a couple of seconds and then got out. But over time, I was able to stay in a bit longer. I was able to start swimming, and it made a difference. I instantly felt like I'd been plugged into a socket, and it wouldn't last. But over time, it did start to last longer. I ended up getting more energy boosts from it. The energy boosts were lasting for longer. And what is so awesome about it is the many different benefits that you get from it. So, you are targeting your nervous system, you are training resilience to all sorts of different stressors, you are reducing inflammation, you are boosting your mental health, which is hugely important when you're long-term ill, you are doing supported movement, things like compression if you've got dysautonomia, which was a large part of what I had. You're getting compressed by the water. So this was absolutely huge. But I think for me, those three things had to go in that order. Because if I'd tried to get into the water when I was hyperventilating, that would actually have been dangerous. So I had to fix the breathing first. So it was almost like one thing led on to another, which led on to another. And over time, those things just really helped so much, to the point where I was able to say I was recovered. And, there were other things that contributed as well. But those were the three most important things, I think. So to leave you with I don't know if I'm qualified to give advice. I can certainly say what I wish I had kind of known early on. So I think not to lose hope, because if we lose hope, we can end up in a big sort of mental spin. And if our mental health is struggling, then it just makes everything else so much worse. So I think really keep that belief in recovery. And how do we do that? We find things that help. So work out what is going on for you. What are your triggers? What are the things that are helping you? And they're not going to be the same thing for everybody. So the three things that were the most benefit to me, maybe you don't want to go jump in cold water. That may not appeal to you. But for me, it was huge. But some very wise person that I interviewed on my podcast said, if you have done something and it doesn't work, that's a good thing, because you don't have to try it again. Because I think, again, the frustration of trying things, why did it work for that person and why didn't it work for me? Well, because you're two different people, I suppose. And I think possibly the last thing I would say is to keep an open mind, because before I got sick, if someone had said that those three things would have made such a difference in my life, I would have laughed them out of town. That's just ridiculous. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, they literally did change my life. They gave me my life back. So yeah, I hope this has been helpful. And yeah, good luck.